I don't know the last time the talks from that have been seen anywhere. Because they all get automatically downloaded here.
They do? Who sees them?
Everybody.
So the title of the Dharma talk is Progress, the concept of progress. Something that we use all the time. I think when Marla was asking, we were talking about that and kind of stuck. So that's how the talk title came from. When you came and asked me, that was still a really good thing to look at, especially when you make the transition from the mundane path of getting a degree, learning how to shoot baskets, learning a skill that is where you're acquiring abilities, and you're able to have benchmarks, as they say in some communities, notches in your pistol. Still use that? And the spiritual path can work that. You can actually look at it a little bit like that, but it seems to be necessary to make the transition from using really obvious, mutually agreed upon signs of progress over to making them very subjective with you. So I would say it this way, this is why we need a teacher, we need a sangha, we need a community. It's just why we study this material over and over and over again. Some of it, studying through spiritual materialism, been through that book, I don't know, time that I've been facilitating that or encouraging people to study that, probably hundreds of times. And so the idea of progress is not that we couldn't look at that a little bit, but we need to do it in such a way that we not only see, not only respect the way that the mundane path has progress. We get ahead at something, we get better at something, we improve. There's progress, and it's commonly accepted. On the spiritual path, quite often, mindfulness meditation, you'll have people making guarantees. If you do this, if you do that, you'll get this, you'll get that. I'm not saying that's wrong. If people want to do that, I'm not going to bother correcting them. I don't have permission to correct them. And so, using the relative idea of progress, I often use the metaphor, which is my invention, but path of climbing a mountain. You start in the valley of delusion, ignorance, confusion, suffering, difficulty, and you start through the teachings, using the metaphor of the mountain, you start to make lowercase p progress. Start to actually move away from that in one sense, but then you actually don't actually leave it. You keep running into the same kinds of difficulties, but your way of handling the difficulties has less of the three poisons: passion, aggression, and ignorance, more awareness. Just to say it in a relative way. It may not be that, but in order to talk about it, you seem to need to do that. So you actually, there's the illusion you're going to get rid of your problems. You're going to get rid of your aggression or your resentment or your whatever kind of difficult, however you want to characterize that, your bad temper. And so sometimes I use the image of you're going up a path towards the summit, which would be realization, fundamental clarity about the nature of samsara, fundamental clarity about the nature of duality, fundamental clarity about the nature of everything, the foundation of everything. You actually are able to see through everything. And I often say that if you see that, if you actually see this, if you realize it yourself, you will probably be tongue-tied, because you realize every time you say anything, you're lying. Every time you open your mouth about anything, it misses the mark. Some of the teachings point to this in different ways. One of them is a hair's breadth deviation fails to accord with the proper attunement. So to leave just the fundamental awareness and try to go into any kind of commentary, elaboration on what it is you're seeing, you actually abandon what you're seeing for some kind of relative settlement. So using images again, going a metaphor, going up the mountain, your particular karma, wiring, causes and conditions that arise as your personality and your way of working with the world and handling the world, your way of working with disappointment, your way of having anger, jealousy issues, whatever kind of issue, will be different than the way the person next to you is working with that. The person next to you may not even sure what the word depression means. They sure know what the word jealousy means or anger. They know what the word resentment means. So it's a very interesting area because every person I meet in the context of their practice, if I have permission to do that. I meet a lot of people that I don't have the permission, and I just hang out. If somebody doesn't function as a student, I can't function as a teacher. I don't have permission. Someone has to be a student, and in order to be a student, they have to have everything, all their sense fields on receive. If they don't, then we're just back to hanging out. Have to receive. And this means you can't really evaluate. You can't evaluate. I'm not saying it's wrong, but if you do that, then it'd be like you going into a geometry class, use another relative image, and saying I don't like that hypotenuse of the hypotenuse of the right triangle. I don't like that. Sounds too much like we're in a zoo. Change it. We don't want that particular. We don't want to be taught in that way. And that could be a sign of almost anything. It could be a sign of progress. It could be a sign of no progress. It could be a sign of a little progress, but not very much. But not the kind of progress you were thinking about. Another kind of progress. Am I making myself clear? Shake your head, yes. Progress. So, of course, I'm being ridiculous. But what I'm saying about the progress idea is, and this is the hard one, is when you're actually making progress, it can feel just the opposite. Like, this is not right. I feel this way or that way, or this is not working, and we immediately do what? Instead of staying with our awareness, with this awareness we've been developing, training, encouraging, heightening, strengthening, sharpening, all those words that what we see, instead of seeing what we see, we add. Instead of seeing just what we see that has no name, it has some kind of a texture, we might say it kind of smells like sardines. It might be some kind of a quality that's leaking through that's not really leaving it, but is giving you something about the texture connected with probably one of the five sense fields. That feels really rough. That feels really slippery. Something that doesn't really vacate the perception, because that's where you're going to need to be when it comes time for you, when you're in your Bodhi mandala, the circle of awakening that is your karma, when the clock strikes 12, for you personally, I don't know when that's going to be. Maybe never. Maybe 3 lifetimes from now. Maybe this lifetime. When that, you need to be, and here again, the way it looks to me, you need to be open. Because when it comes, you need to be open. Otherwise, you could miss your life. You could miss your own awakening by open fear, clamping down on something. Oh, that can't be right. That's too simple. In other words, adding on to it. adding on to whatever's arising, adding on to I'm getting worse, I'm not getting better. So what seems to happen is we're meditators, we're going along, and we find that things are happening in such a way that it's just too much, it's too intense. It doesn't feel good, it feels wrong. But yet you're not on a mundane path. You're not on a path that things show up in that particular way. We're talking about the fundamental nature of, is a dumb word, reality. What the hell is that? The fundamental nature of this entire matrix of being, this thing that you didn't plan on doing, that suddenly you find yourself. I mean, I say this over and over. Go look in the mirror. Go look in the mirror with no thoughts. See who that is. See what that is. If you fundamentally see what that is, fundamentally your decision-making situation based on causes and conditions, on success and failure, based on progress, completely collapses. And what does it collapse into? It collapses into, not separate. This is available to everyone here. It's available to anyone there. It's available to people that never have heard of me, heard me talk, and have never heard of me, and never will. It's available to everyone. I don't have anything left to do. Do you? To be in that situation, you're totally at the mercy of whatever's arising in front of you. You no longer get to have a separate person with opinions, ideas of should and shouldn't, they should, they shouldn't. You're just completely with whatever's arising. Progress is basically shot in the ass. Yes, sir.
How would somebody want?
They might not want to see that. More? Do you want to see that? Well, why do you want to see it? Dummy. Yeah, it's a valid question. I'm not mocking you from the point of view of that. I'm just saying, you say, why would somebody want to see that? They probably wouldn't necessarily want to see that, but they might want to end their suffering. They might notice in the middle of the night they're terrified of something, they don't know what it is. They might notice that when they go into work, that they, even though things are fine, and the work is there and the work is ordinary, same thing, but there's something completely irritating, disgusting, abrasive about being in that situation, and you can't find what that, you don't know how to work with that. And the mundane or the common way of working with something like that is to correct it, make it change, or get out of there. Correct it if it's open to that. So what we're doing is we're trying to see what it is, not what to do with it. More? Attention?
Are we missing a meaning every time?
Yeah, probably on some level. You could say it that way, as a teaching or as a way of encouraging someone to just whatever occurs, don't do anything with it. Whatever occurs, and that's challenging because sometimes what is occurring is a direct threat to you, and sometimes what is occurring is doesn't feel particularly good or helpful. Difficult. It's difficult if somebody's being aggressive with you. It's difficult to not feel some kind of aggression come up towards them. You might not express it, but they tend to resonate. So the idea is not to get rid of the aggression. We're not talking about getting rid of any of the three poisons. It's very easy to go there and say, "Oh, I'm no longer aggressive. I'm no longer grasping. I'm no longer fixated," and so on and so forth. This misses the fundamental understanding of that nothing is separate from anything else. Dependent origination, it misses it. Everything arises, including your anger, including your dissatisfaction, including the suffering, including.
How does karma influence our awakening?
So just saying it in a broad stroke is the karma, which means action, just the causes and conditions, the particular milieu, the matrix in which we find ourselves with our family, our friends, our job, our country, our everything that is functioning as our, everything from our enemies to our homies. You know, we're just here, and that's kind of our karma. And you'll notice just by talking to somebody for 3 minutes, you'll know what your karmic connection is with them. You'll know especially what your karmic connection is with them if you don't do anything with what is arising as far as adding on, I shouldn't feel that way. Or another one that's harder to see is, I really like this person. And the positive ones are the hardest ones to see because they're positive, good, feel good. Negative ones make you feel bad, make you feel irritated, make you feel put upon. But they're just karma. More?
Well, it's leading towards.
What is? Question?
Yes. I think you've said previously that if this is your lifetime, is every lifetime an opportunity to awaken?
To address that in a relative way, yes. But first find out if there's a lifetime. I know who this is. And we will all fool around here and talk and have lunch and joke about things and tell stories. And you know, what was your favorite place? I really, when I heard that, I thought, I don't have a favorite place. I'm trying to think of a favorite place I really liked. I couldn't find one. I thought, well, maybe I'll use somebody else's. So I went around. Everybody's here for that, right? Their favorite place. I really liked it when I was in Portugal. I'd like to go to Portugal. So, but I couldn't. So, the only thing I could think of is one time when I was 9. But everything is kind of it's not that it's mushed together. It's just like it's not. They aren't a bunch of separate things.
Well, there's an old saying there, but for the grace of God go I. I had such bad luck as the next, you know, or otherwise that could have been me. And
yes.
So it just karma just sounds like an escape. Oh, it's just karma.
Well, you know, we can, the idea of using the word karma is just to help us have some kind of access to the causes and conditions. But fundamentally, this is relative truth, which is fraught with untruth. It's not fundamentally true. It's relatively true. Because of this, that happens. Because of this, that happens. If you look around it, you see that everything is so dependent on everything else for its apparent situation, its apparent warmth, coolness, color, texture. It's just amazing to be a human being. We don't know how we got here. We don't know how we got into such a rotten situation of having the particular life we have. We don't like this life. Why weren't we smarter? Why weren't we better looking? Why weren't we born to a couple of millionaires? You know, it just sounds silly, but things pass. It's passing through my mind. It's probably passes through your mind too, or some version of it. Somebody's really upset because their house is burning down. Karma. Go.
You
said I think you said if you're just on receive.
Receive. What is that?
An emergency.
It's a fire truck.
No, it's not. What is it?
It's your
I'm not going to
mind.
tell you, huh?
It's your mind.
Oh no, we got a Zen person here. No, I'm not saying it like a test, like what is that? I'm saying that could be a what question. Anytime anything happens, if you approach it with what is that, then you begin to see the way you are actually projecting onto something, rather than something has some kind of separate identity, separate from your separate life. If you actually see what things are, you're not separate from them. Go.
And you said if you're on receive, you can see what your karmic connection is. Someone outside of feeling good and feeling bad. What do you mean by what you're?
You can just see. I'm just saying you can see the ordinariness of it. This is why it fools us, because the transcendent world, this sacred world, and the ordinary world are not separate from each other. So usually what we have access to is just the ordinary situation. But if you look at that closely, that also is sacred. That is sacred. Not two, not separate. And it's something that has to be seen. It can't just include it conceptually. Well, yeah, I see that nothing is separate, and I see that we're all one, and I see, and just kind of smush it together based on intellectual apprehension of the teachings or our understanding of the teaching. Yes.
Talking about karma, it seems like there's kind of a certain amount of momentum that comes into this lifetime before we're born, that there's influences that we can't quite see.
Yeah.
What is the other part of that it seems like if it was just that'd be predetermination, that it's always been going, it's going to keep going, and you're just there for the ride. To what degree do we have, what is our relationship, I guess, to that momentum of karma?
Well, the way, fundamentally I don't know for sure, but the way I would say to relate to it as an awareness practice is don't object to it, don't agree with it, don't look away. It's back to the three poisons again. Whatever is arising, don't push it down. What is arising, don't add to it or fluff it up or explain it. Have a willingness to be in the mystery of the whole thing. It's completely, if you actually see it, if you came up with any word, it would be mysterious. Because we can't actually find a reference point in it that is separate from what it is, other than our projections onto it. So you can project onto it, and then you have that kind of a dynamic going on. But whatever the force of that karma is, this is why sometimes people will say, will come with and present something like, I'm so angry at so-and-so, or I'm so upset. They might know, they might have a reason, they might not have a reason. And I say to them, just trust yourself. I'm not saying, not giving someone permission, so to speak, to strike out at someone, but stay with that. This person is actually teaching you. They might not be functioning as a teacher, I'm just teaching you. They might not be doing that, but being in contact with them. This is why Sangha is so important. So, because you're not going to find this kind of abrasiveness out in the world that is able to actually lift your understanding of things, rather than suppress them and beat you down and make you wrong or make the other person wrong. So staying with whatever kind of karma, whatever kind of energy is moving, albeit in your own mind. You and I have even talked about the negativity that rises for you unsummoned. Who knows where that's from. And what do I say? I say to other people who bring this kind of a situation, I just do nothing with it. Don't turn it into something like, well, it just must be my karma, or it just must be my need for more medication, or my psychology, or how I was treated when I was 4 years old. To find reasons, even if the reason does have some kind of validity to it, it's not so helpful, because if we go in that doorway, then we find it's a rotating thing. We go round and around and around. It's why, because, why, because, why, because. So if you can go into what, that's where you might begin to see the actual mirror quality of reality, which is talked about in all the teachings. That when you see this, the wall, the altar, the tree, a cat walking across the alleyway, you're looking at your mind. When I say your mind, it's not even yours, it doesn't belong to you. You actually are able to awaken at any moment. Some of the teachings in Zen talk about someone sweeping, I can't think of the monk's name, he's sweeping the yard or sweeping the temple walkway, and a stone or something hits a tile, makes a clicking sound, and he awakens because he sees that. When I say because, I don't know. My way of understanding that is this was the last straw of exterior reality. So it was your mind. I'm not saying there aren't separate bodies, but who you actually are is not separate from anything anywhere. Never has been. But here we are manifesting in apparent singularity and separateness. And we actually, as I was saying earlier to someone, you don't realize oneness. You realize delusion. You realize the delusion of separation. When you realize that, then it's before your grandfather, grandmother, then you understand this. You're not going to stop necessarily being grouchy. You're not going to stop necessarily having ideas or opinions about things. But the fixation is gone of someone who's having that. Fixation is gone of someone who is with the karma, against the karma, for the war, against the war. Voting Republican, voting Democrat, doing anything. There's no you can function just fine. You can do whatever you want. When I say you can do whatever you want, and it doesn't function exactly that way. But this is a way of encouraging you to relax and relax into the dynamic of yourself. As Trumper said, which I didn't understand for a couple of decades, be genuine. Stop trying to get rid of who you are, your karma, be some kind of special person based on ideals and so on. Sheldon.
What is it that makes that?
Probably some kind of adding on, some kind of attachment to it based on separation, but based on an inability to. Here's how it looks. Here's how it looks like people are doing this. And if you look inside, you find you've got a knot somewhere. And that the knot may release, it may not. No pun intended. But the seeing of it is all that needs to be done. Nothing has to be released. Nothing has to change. As His Holiness the 16th Karmapa said in 1981 on his deathbed, nothing happens. Further questions? Sokuzan?
How is the concept of karma helpful?
I think it's a way of looking at the cause and effect situation that's happening all over the place, and realizing that your manifestation here, as in your case, a woman who's also studying the Dharma, who's a physical therapist and so on, all of the different things that happening, your relationship to your family as you're growing up, to look back over and see the causes and conditions that cause certain things. This happened, therefore this happened. When that was showed up, then this happened too. This started happening, but then that got in the way of that, so that stopped that. To see the causes and conditions. Karma are the actions that are functioning then in an apparent reality and a relative truth. Sambriti Satya been talked about in the Hindu tradition endlessly. Paramartha Sattva, the transcendent understanding of this, or the fundamental reality, the absolute, where nothing occurs. The things occur in the relative world. This moves there and that moves there. When this happens, that falls down. When that falls down, this lightens up. To be just use simple images. You can see it in your own life. You go here, this happens. You don't go there, that doesn't happen. It's a very duh kind of thing that's going on. It seems necessary if we bring our awareness down into that and watch what moves without adding to the movement. You can also see the way something will happen, and then instead of just seeing what happens, we come up with some other interpretation. We elaborate on that, which extends the very simple occurrence of something into a spider web of connections and things that this causes that, this hits that, that hits that, and it takes us self-centeredness. It sucks us right in. It magnetizes us into a world that we think we can control. We think we have some say-so over.
Is our delusion that we believe in cause and effect?
The belief in anything. Grasping at something that you have not inspected. Because if you actually really do look closely, and I'm not saying 15 minutes worth or 3 days worth, but if you really look closely, you'll see through your own understanding that nothing is separate. It does not feel like progress. It does not feel like, sometimes people talk about aha. It doesn't feel like Haley?
How can we use the idea of progress on the path if we might not recognize it?
This is why it seems to be necessary to have a container that we call the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and to actually commit to it. Because ego wants to commit. Ego wants to become enlightened, but as has been said, Trumper Jay said it in a way that I think is pretty much explains the whole thing. Is ego cannot witness its own funeral. It can't. The end of the self-centeredness. And so one of the ways to work with this, probably other ways, is to take refuge in the Buddha, refuge in the Dharma, refuge in the Sangha, and to actually do that with some intention. I'm going to do this path. I'm going to get on this path, and I'm going to do it, because it's not easy, even after years. Sometimes, depending on one's causes and conditions, the realization that you're looking for. Here's what things are, and here's your preconception of realization. Keep looking to live up to that, or try to be that, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha will make it easier if you practice it to see that that's an illusion, that's a projection. Yes.
Can ego not?
Well, ego is unreal. Fundamentally, it's not real, so it can't. So there is no funeral. But it looks like there's going to be one. And it gets worried but it wants to be in there because it thinks that's coming. The self-centeredness is going to be seen to be unreal, or it's going to be, the death of ego. Not actually a death. But the fear about that's going to happen can get really pretty visceral. You all have some version of this, I'm sure yourself, about just being kind of terrified of the unknown. Certainly have had my share of that. Pretty much lightened up now, but it went on way into adulthood for me. It was all over the place. It was very, very painful. It was very painful to know, very painful for me to realize when I was a 32 young guy, to know that I was going to, if I was going to awaken and understand this, that I was going to have to subject myself, my life, to some kind of a really strong discipline under a master. In other words, under someone who knew more about this than I did. And so it was painful. It was painful to do that. It was painful to continue to do that. It was painful to deal with all the other people who were trying to do that under him, because they were quite irritating. People who thought they knew more than I did, probably did. Yes?
The relationship between discipline and progress?
Well, there's a couple of really strong concepts. Progress is getting somewhere, which doesn't really, works in a way, but you have to really understand that the progress, you're being more and more and more aware of delusion. As Dogen said in the 13th century, the sentient beings are deluded about what enlightenment is, and Buddhas are enlightened about the nature of delusion. Very simple kind of idea. So, I mean, it's a concept, and a concept of discipline is, people have different ideas. Isn't discipline where you are always on time and you always, it's your time to be on the Hanan bell, you do it, and if you're always doing the form exactly right. So it's not so much about the performance part about it, it's about the continued practice, and you could even say fine-tuning. Each person is different. I can watch, and you could do this too, especially those of you who live here, you can watch someone function on really strong forms. This is the way the form is taught, and then you'll see people kind of deviate from it, either intentionally, because they don't really want to do a form, they want to do their idea, their interpretation of the form. They don't really want, it feels too much like a sheep, a lemming, to do the exact form the way everybody does. I need to do it with a little bit more pizzazz, maybe. And or that may show up without that kind of a comment, just thinking, well, I'll move this way, I'll do it this way, I'll do it that way. This usually doesn't arise unless you've done it hundreds of times. I'm not sure if that addresses your question. I kind of went off track. Yes?
What is the relationship between discipline and practice?
Nothing happens twice. You're not going to realize that. As an awareness practice, it won't show up unless you continually do the roll down on the Hanan bell. You come in and every time you sit down, eventually, if you do it enough, you realize that, of course, it's beginner. Now I know what beginner's mind is. I used to think it was something you did. Now I realize it's something you are. You've never been separate from beginners. And to do that is to begin to understand Buddha nature, realization. Michael?
Like it's nothing. Realizations you have from karma until you're off with, and you go back into like socializing. So my question is, how do we do nothing with our own realizations whenever they just eyes?
Sounds like you're doing it. Continue to do that. Spend as much time on the cushion looking at the wall, watching your mind, the things in your mind swell up and settle down and move this way and move that way, and just observe. And some of that observation, if you do enough of it, you'll begin to observe your actual kind of knee-jerk add-on. Something happens and you add something to it. It takes a while. And then what is done there is, this is the hard part of it, is to not control that. To actually just be with whatever arises and whatever falls away. The second you, the hour you, the day that you try to change something into something else is when you add on to the spinning quality of samsara or the confusion. Start to go around and around and around. Difficult. And each person has their own fear, albeit something maybe really deep that kind of just, murmurs every now and then we go back to kind of covering that up and try to create a meditator who's serene, try to create a meditator who's a beginner's mind meditator, try to create that, discover it.
Are you able to face aspects of karma, then go back and life and socialize and not feel like you're wearing your problems on your face?
Gotcha. So you may have to wear your problems on your face. So what I would say to address your question more basically is repetition. Sit a lot. Come back to the cushion over and over and over. And especially when the ego mind is starting to say, well, this isn't working so well. I'm not really feeling as calm as I thought I would, or meditation is supposed to be this, or supposed to be that. That's why it's necessary to have a sangha and a teacher and a teaching. Because otherwise the thinking process mind starts to make up stuff and justify this or justify that, accept, reject, and starts to manipulate and create another kind of world of the me, being right. So in your situation, you're a young man, you've been practicing since what, January, I think you said? So a few months, those are really good. You need that situation, but it's a matter of just repetition. If you need encouragement, come and see me. If you need encouragement, talk to the Sangha, talk to other people, talk to people who are monks, who've been doing this for a number of years. Intensely. Interact with other people and see how interesting it is that people have different ways of working with this. Very, very unique, that don't have all that much to do with someone's ego. It has to do with just the way someone's confusion is structured in a circle. So they keep biting their own tail and calling it progress. You don't have to do that there. Fundamentally, there isn't any progress. There's only this. And what happens is the image for this is the man who goes, his father has gone from his house. It's an old Tibetan story that I probably will get all wrong. But he leaves his house looking for his father, and he goes over hill and dale and mountain and river and woods and desert and everything. And he finally comes back to the other side of his house. And his father was in the kitchen all the time. And his father said, "Some eggs." It's that ordinary. It's that kind of ordinariness that completely unmasks the ego. But it only is going to happen if we have to actually step on the path, and that path for you may involve going over mountains and rivers. For someone else, it may be staying in the living room and spinning in circles. Another person may be going in and out the window. Out the window, now I'm outside. Now I'm inside. Inside, outside. That may be your life koan, may be inside the house, outside the house. Or it may take on a completely different shape altogether that make any sense to someone else. But the important thing in any practice is whatever arises is important. What is more important is the space in which it occurs, because that's the transition you're slowly making. You're going from what arises in the space over to the space itself, which is, fancy name is Mahavipassana, the great awareness, great panoramic awareness. And then when you do that, which is emptiness, then you realize that what is arising in the space is also space, is also emptiness. So they are not two. And this is the transition from that's sometimes called Mahamudra or Dzogchen or the Great Perfection. You can do that yourself. I'm telling you that. Don't believe a word I say, but don't ignore it.
When you advise us to sit and observe, should that observation highly focused kind of observation?
Both. Just the way you ask me about that. You know, I've been sitting a long time, so you've already done this. You've already had really intense, focused, highly pinpoint observation, and you're a naturally disciplined person anyway. It's not a compliment. You know me better than a compliment anybody. But it's a description of your particular way of working with your mind. It's very, you know, you have the ability to go down and be very, very like a pinpoint, be very focused, and then you'll see that, and then you'll back away from that, and you go into spaciousness. You go, and this is called shamatha vipassana. Shamatha practice, I teach it naturally. I don't necessarily tell somebody you need to follow your breath and so that. So you have a natural sense of going into very much like a one-pointed situation and then expanding back out. So both. And you'll know, you yourself, just by sitting down in front of the wall and just watching your mind, your mind will naturally do whatever it needs to do. It's like breathing. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Just say that. That's pretty good. I like that.
I'm wondering that ordinary.
The ego tends to evaluate or take the inventory on that and think that it is kind of flat. You know, that can't be it. That's too ordinary. Ego's looking for more or less a little bit more fireworks. Some kind of now I see some kind of fancy thing. That being said, there are teachers who, and Longchenpa is one of them, who is able to talk about the ordinary in such a way that it's kind of flowery, but still he never leaves the earth. You always feel like you're listening to a man, to a teacher who has completely planted in the earth and is able to talk about heaven. So his teaching is like poetry. Head on the ground, head in the clouds, head in the sky. We're not separate from the sky. Not separate. No.
When you hear people, stories of people who awoke, like Byron Katie described a bug walking across her leg. So there's some recognition at that event. What's the difference between knowing that and then ego coming around and describing what you think was it?
If you realize that ego is not real, if you realize that the self-centeredness is not real, then you don't care whether it describes it or not. You don't care. You're not part of the bug. You're also not the bug at the same time. It's not two. You actually transcend this world of cause and effect while you're still in it. Still bathroom, you still eat, you still live, you still have a toothache or not. You still get irritated by what someone is saying or not saying. But there's nothing added on. There's nothing extra. It's just whatever's happening is it doesn't need correcting.
So it seems like a lot of these stories, there's a moment where there was some kind of shift that they can come back and say, that was the time. So
some people do that. I don't talk that way. A little bit. mainly I'm interested in this. I'm not interested in something happened years ago. And I think she, speaking of Byron Katie, or Ramana Maharshi, or other spontaneous realizers, had some kind of aha before I had a big aha before I started. But it faded away within a few hours. And it really is just an experience, goes away. But the actual situation doesn't do anything. You can go anywhere, doesn't come, you can't lose it, you don't have it, not separate. Nobody owns awareness. You realize your awareness, even though you have all these little twinkling personality things that come and go, and well, you all know how entertaining I am. But it doesn't add up to somebody who has something or knows something. It's just completely ordinary. And you could say, if you see that deeply, not only with yourself, but with others, you realize you don't have to do anything with yourself. You don't have to change yourself. You don't have to be a special person. You don't have to remodel anything, or recondition, or refurbish, or patch all the rust spots. You can just be genuine. And that may involve a lot of body odor. Where is he at? There he is. I pick on Shoka. Smells.
He's proud of it too.
Yeah, he's proud of his odor. Yeah. Well, we all have to have some kind of. Good question. Yes. Okay.
Does observing what your mind really does change?
It will change in that there's no grasping and no rejecting, which is another kind, which is the more subtle kind of grasping, is to reject something through passion or aggression. When you're not shutting down on it, then it will, it's like it liquefies. It's like instead of the fixation part of it, it just becomes more pliable, more like liquid, and then depends on who you're around. Whoever you're around, their karma and your karma are not separate, and you can feel that with them, and it may be feel good, it may be abrasive, but here's the amazing thing: is you don't have to do anything about that. You can actually just be genuine and be with someone and realize that your karma, their karma, your intuition of what's happening with them. If you can just be with them, then you won't take it personal. You'll just notice that they're who they are. You don't have to fix them. And unless they give you permission, you shouldn't be meddling with them at all. Unless they say to you, I want your help in this. Will you help me? Will you, in my situation being a Dharma teacher, will you teach me? If I have permission, and I will do that. That may not be comfortable. It might not be because I'm doing something horrible or bad. It's just hanging around with a person who's you feel like they can see you. But yes, your dynamic will change. That's one of the things about awareness practices. We have less and less boundary to ourselves, especially around Sangha. We notice that things are blending our feelings, our ideas, our memories, our hopes and fears, and personality dynamics tend to interact with others. Sometimes it might seem to interfere with others. Yes, be a lot of changing. You can, I can just say, what's it like when you go around a lot of people who don't practice? Say that to anyone. Go hang around 3 or 4 people who don't have any mind training at all. Not that bad. I'm not saying that you always be around meditators, but there's quite a contrast around people who have no understanding. They're not working with their minds in a in an open kind of way. They are kind of clamping, and they get their security or their sense of accomplishment or their sense of progress from clamping down and evaluating, judging, and I was here, now I'm there, and I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that. Whereas meditators may be kind of at a loss to talk to you about. Why do you meditate? I'm not sure why. Doesn't it help you? Yeah. How does it help you? You feel more peaceful? Or more, you'll notice that, yeah, there's some of that going on, but the extension of your, to use the fancy word, of your prajna, very difficult to share that with someone. It's very difficult to have someone ask you about that and say, yeah, I can actually read your mind. You're not reading their mind, but you see the way in which they're confused. And you also see that they will not give you permission to help them. They're not ready for that. So you're respectful. You see the boundary and you allow them to be who they are. And you still are friends with them. You still care about them. You still love them. Very interesting area. Any further questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody would be willing to help set up for Oreo